Thank you so very much for that video. That got me in the heart and the feels. I love getting to know every single one of you. Love being your pastor. So thank you again, especially to Tommy, Dad. Thank you. Thank you so much for that video. My love to you. Thank you so much. Several years ago, I was in a Starbucks. Surprise, right? So I'm in the Starbucks, and before they remodeled, as soon as you went in, they had some tables, really cushy chairs. There was this one guy who would read these small paperback science fiction novels. And at any given time, you go in and he's reading, and 5 minutes later, he's knocked out. He's just asleep. So it's just a great vibe. He's there, tables, and then there's a bar. Not like a bar, like a bar where you sit and have your coffee. So there's this bar and it has 4 chairs. And I love these. I just love that space. It was my spot. So I go in and it's late in the evening. I'm going and leave in the evening, trying to get 2 or 3 hours worth of work in, get the coffee that I typically get. I come to the bar and there's a guy to the far right. So with the guy code, I get the one right beside of him. No, I'm just kidding, right? So I put 2 in between us, and I get over here, and I'm about to just laser focus, just lock in. And he goes, "How you doing?" And I'm like, oh, no, it's going to be one of those guys. I need to focus here. I'm in this situation to focus, lock in, and everything. It's like, "Had a good day?" And I'm like, okay, God, I need you. I'm going to get frustrated really quick here. Help me in this moment. If he needs me and you've brought us together, let's do this. So I'm like, yeah, I've had a pretty good day. How about you? And then we talk, and we talk, and we talk for about an hour. A couple of days later, I actually see him in front of Meijer. I'm coming out, pushing the cart across the crosswalk there, coming out of the store, and then I see this black car come by. And we had met each other, exchanged names. His name was Doug. So this black car is coming, and I hear, "Hey, David." And I look, and out, his left arm's hanging out the window, and he's just waving. So I steer the buggy over there. I'm like, "Hey, Doug, so good to see you. How are things going?" He was like, "Oh, they're great. Things are just going great." And he told me briefly about some of the events of his day, and it sounded like he had a really cool life. A couple of days later, I go into Starbucks. He's there. A couple of days later, I go into Starbucks. It's late in the evening again. He's there. A couple of days later, I go to the Starbucks. Instead of going in, I sit on the patio. And I'm out there. You're following, okay? Just make sure you're checking with me. So I'm on the patio and got my stuff out, meeting someone there. We're hanging out, doing our conversation. One of the baristas comes out and says, "Hey, have you seen Doug?" I'm like, "Yeah, I saw him a few days ago." And they're like, "Well, he's been here every day, and it's been very intentional. But we haven't seen him in about 3 days." I'm like, "Well, I think we have a mutual connection. Let me reach out and see if we can locate him." So I reach out to my connection. They haven't seen him for a while either. So one thing leads to another. We have this great conversation going on with me, the barista, a few other people trying to find this guy, locate him, and think we're going to. Well, I'm at Starbucks a few days later on the patio again, and a barista comes out. She says, "Have you heard about Doug?" I'm like, "No, I know we're trying to locate him." She said, "Well, he checked out. He's gone." My heart sank. I'm thinking, wait a minute. I just saw the guy and I had a conversation with him, not too terribly long ago. And he told me some really cool stuff that is just firing in his life. And he checked out? Are you kidding me? So, are you going to give me that mic? Okay, all right. I won't be able to use my hands, okay? So he checked out. He's got a great life, and he checked out. Are you kidding me? What happened? Nobody knows. And that's the point of one of the reasons we do a series like this, because you get a room full of people. Sometimes nobody knows what's going on. And you've got some people looking at your life, and it's like, there's some really high moments. There's some cool stuff going on, and nobody knows how you really feel. So as your pastor doing a series like this, sometimes it's hit or miss. Sometimes it's hit or miss with you. Maybe life is just firing on all 8 cylinders with you and it's going really well. So in a series like this, you get your phone out, play your game and all that, and it's cool, right? But then some of us, we really listen. We hear. The Holy Spirit allows the text to really hit home, and it does some changes. And you've seen that over the past 2 weeks with people just meeting at the cross, and we're going to do that again here in just a little bit, meeting and pouring their hearts out and saying, this is what's going on. And I want a new direction. I want to shift, if you will. And when we step into a series like this, it's intended to say, hey, there's probably no other relationships or no other settings or no other opportunities for you to connect with some of the stuff you need to connect with, to sort through some stuff so that you don't check out. And maybe it's not life that you would check out of. Maybe it's a really important relationship or a really important position. So this is an opportunity, a God-given opportunity for you and I to really connect with the beauty and the power and the application of God's word into your life and to my life. So when we do this, we're going to walk through a story today from the Old Testament. It's a guy named Elijah. Has everybody heard of Elijah? If you've been around church for a while, you've probably heard of Elijah. So it's 1 Kings 19, and it's a really cool story because it's kind of like my friend Doug. He has this really high moment, like something really cool happens in his life. And if you've been around church for a while, this is the story you probably know about Elijah. He's talking with some people who don't have like a religious background like some of us do. So they're kind of bad guys, if you will, just to make the story short. They're kind of bad guys, and Elijah's bartering with them over some spiritual stuff. And they're like, we serve God. And Elijah's like, well, actually, I serve the one true God, and I want him to know you, and I want you to be known by him. And they're like, no, we serve the God. So Elijah has this great idea. He was like, let's build a couple of altars. And here's what we'll do. We'll get the stuff ready. We'll get all the wood and the resources ready, 2 altars. Here's what we do. We'll make sure yours is extremely dry. We'll make it as dry as it can possibly be, and then we'll try to light it. And then we'll make mine, and we'll just douse it with water over and over and over again. We'll drag the hose out, put it in the middle of the pit there, and just let it run all night long so that this bad boy is wet. So they do this thing, and then when it's Elijah's turn to actually light his altar, he just flicks his, match right there, and then boom, the whole thing is just consumed. And can you imagine a setting like that? I mean, we're so far removed from that. That sounds like TV or a movie. But could you imagine being in that moment? Well, it's right after that moment, right after Doug passes the crosswalk at Meyer and says, hey, this is the cool stuff going on in my life. Right after that moment, we continue to read about Elijah. So some people hear what has happened, and they've got a little bit of influence. And they're like, we don't like that. So they start to pursue Elijah, and they're actually going to take his life. So we jump into 1 Kings 19, and that's what's happening in this guy's life. And these are the words we read right after that high, right after that moment, we read these words. Elijah was afraid, and he ran. And I guarantee you there's some people here this morning, and you're just filled with fear. You're afraid. Well, this is why we do a series like this, to help you connect with the living God who can help you in moments where you feel vulnerable or unsure, or even us men, like we want to run away. So the story goes on. He wants to run away, and he actually travels to a place called Beersheba. And he's got some guys with him, so he leaves them, and he travels a day into the wilderness just to be alone. And if you like Bible stuff, they suggest that the idea of the desert or wilderness isn't just a place. It's not just a place like on Google Maps, a desert, and then you type walking and you want to get there. It's going to be a 2-day journey, right? It's not like that. It's actually more along the lines of a place, a space where someone encounters divinity. It's a space where someone can work through some spiritual stuff. So Elijah goes in, and he's probably hoping to have some kind of encounter, but he's in a very vulnerable mood. And maybe that's where you are this morning. And some of you, if you're new to church or maybe new to Madison Hills, you come in here, and like I've heard before with first-time visitors, I'm giving God or I'm giving church one more shot. And you're hoping to have some kind of encounter that lets you know he's real or he's there or the people in this building really do care about you. This is why when we start talking about Elijah and him being filled with fear, there's a really interesting and I think super practical implication with this for you and I. You've heard the word grief, right? And if you've studied grief or you've experienced some type of loss in your life that has led you to grief, you've probably heard of the 5 stages. But when you really get into researching grief and what it's all about, a couple of things. One, you'll see these stages usually listed as like denial. There's some kind of loss in your life, and it doesn't have to be someone, it can be something. But it causes you to deny that this is really happening. But then when you get your mind around it, and you get your sorts and you're stable and you realize this really is my reality, then you're filled with anger. And that anger can spill over to some kind of desperate bargaining, hoping that you can change the setup. And when you realize that your reality is reality, well, that can lead someone into just the stages of the depths of depression. And then over some time, there's just acceptance. They say those are the 5 stages. But when you do a really good study of this, you realize that the 5 stages aren't necessarily stages at all. You can weave in and out. And not only can you weave in and out, you can experience all 5 of those in a given moment, rapidly, and again, and again. And the more I pastor and the more I work with people, especially behind the scenes, the more convinced I am that we need many, not M-A-N-Y, but M-I-N-I, many grief sessions where just something happens and life just sucker punches us right in the gut and you get the wind knocked out of you. Maybe you need a mini grief section to sort through this. Well, I tell you that because when you study grief, there's this big idea, and it's a leading thought, that grief and fear are at times interchangeable. C.S. Lewis is known for, one of his books, known for the statement, I never knew grief could feel so much like fear. And when psychologists study grief, they say, maybe that's because grief really is fear. They're intertwined with one another. And fear is that session where you can have a mini grief, 5 stages of grief, fear factor going on in your life. Well, that's probably what's happening with Elijah. So when you keep reading this story, after this high, he's afraid, he's fleeing, he's going into the desert. Here's what he says. He goes to this one certain bush, just drops against the wall and slides down. And he says, you know what? I've had enough. And the guy wants to die. Now, if you'll give me 30 to 60 seconds, let me slide over here and do something. And I do this every chance we have, just naturally with the text, because I've done this with a nearly 100% success rate. And I have to tell you, when I think about my friend Doug, sometimes that story haunts me because I think, wow, here was a guy that the very first time I met him, I put up some distance. I put up a wall. I was in my own world. And maybe him asking me how my day was his way of reaching out. And man, I missed that. If I'd have been fully absorbed in that, fully welcoming, if I would have given Doug maybe what he was looking for, maybe we could have taken Doug on a different direction and he would still be with us. But that haunts me. So every shot I have, every opportunity I have, that's just natural. We don't want to, make it or force it or turn it into something it's not. I just want to say, hey, if that's you, that you're thinking about checking out, or you are like Elijah, I feel like I've just had enough. And you want to die. If that is you, will you please see me after service? There are so many other options for you. And you are valuable, even if you don't feel it right now in the moment. Or life has you leaning toward that direction of checking out. There's a necessity for your life. Please give me at least one opportunity to have a conversation with you and expose you to other options that you have. If that's you, please see me after service. So the story goes on, and it's really neat. Keep reading in 1 Kings 19. So Elijah's there. He's also super tired. He's just fatigued. So he falls asleep. And while he's asleep, this angel comes and visits him twice. First time, he just taps him on the shoulder. It's like, Elijah, wake up. I brought you some food. Eat it. And this is where it gets really interesting. And I think if you and I are honest, this might be one of the places where we actually struggle when it comes to difficult moments in our lives. Or when it comes to those moments where we're supposed to move forward and we really don't know how. Or if you're anything like me, and we're being really honest right now, there's times when you want to move forward, you know how to move forward, and you choose not to. I've been there way too many times to know I'm not alone with that. So Elijah, this angel comes, taps him on the shoulder and says, Elijah, wake up. Here's a meal, eat this. Then an angel comes again a second time, and this is where it gets really real for you and I. Angel taps him and says, Elijah, wake up, eat. But he says, because the journey is too much for you. You like that language? It's not, hey, Elijah, get up. I know this is really hard, so we're just going to take it away. Elijah, get up. I know this is really hard for you, so we're just going to remove you from this situation. Hey, Elijah, we know this is really hard, so God's going to snap his fingers and make everything all right. That's not what the text says. Elijah, get up. There's still a long way to go. Elijah, yeah, it's a difficult journey. Elijah, yeah, it's tough. Elijah, yes, you still have to go that way. So here's some food for you. And what the angel provides is exactly what Elijah needs. That's amazing. And I bet you could share some stories. You could come up here, take this mic, and share some stories where it was a very difficult season for you, strenuous. You didn't know if you were going to get through, or you sure didn't know how you were going to get through. But it seemed like little by little, there was provision. Maybe just enough for you to take the next step. Just enough for you to move forward a little. And then the next day or the next week, there was a little bit more provision that enabled you to move forward. That is so important. And here, I really want you to get this point. And there's no better way to describe this than a story from Fazoli's. Okay? Does anybody else like Fazoli's? I was wondering if we were a Fazoli's church. Seems like a little tension there. Some timidity raising the hand. I don't know. Okay, so Fazoli's. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I like it or not. If Michelle orders it, I'll eat it. But I don't know if I like it while I'm eating it. You ever have any food? Okay, that's how I am with Fazoli's. So we call in a big order, and I go get it, bring it home, and it was supposed to be spaghetti, and they're great breadsticks, and then fettuccine with the sauce that they bring. And apparently it's one of Bella's favorites. She just loves it. So I go get the food, bring it back home. We get the spread out, get it all out, and we realize that we don't have any fettuccine sauce. And the breadsticks, I don't know if they're just cold or still frozen. They haven't been cooked or what. And the spaghetti, if you've been to Fazoli's, you've probably had this happen to you before. You open the lid, the plastic lid, you've got the big bowl there with the spaghetti, and you stick a fork in it to pull some out or some kind of tong to pull some out, and it's a big ball. You know, it's like a ball of yarn or something. It just comes out like that. So that happens. It's a little cold, and they're like, just call back. Just call over there and see if you can get a refund. This just isn't going to work, and we'll get something else. So I'm like, all right. And my kids, they love drama. They love drama. So I look up Fazoli's number, and I'm about to dial, and Sophie's like, speakerphone. So I put it on speakerphone. I'm like, hey, can I speak to a manager? This is the manager. And I'm like, we just got a meal from there, and it's just not good. There's several things wrong with it. You know, I don't want to be disrespectful, but there's several things wrong with it. Can we just get it comped and I can bring the food back or whatever? And she was like, yeah, that'll be fine. I just need the card that you purchased with it. I'm like, okay, I'll bring that. Don't want to give that info to you over the phone, so I'll bring it and whatever. So I load the stuff up. I drive over to Fazoli's. I go in, but before I did, we'd had a conversation over at the house where this gal on the phone just sounded deflated. Like she sounded scared, or if she wasn't scared, this had happened before. and probably that day. So I zip over to Fazoli's. I go in, I've got the food. I'm like, hey, I called a moment ago. And she was like, yeah, I remember you. And I'm like, okay. So she was like, you can keep the food. And so I'm like, I don't know, do you keep it? We don't want it. So now it's who's going to throw it away. So I'm like, okay, so I get it. And she was like, so here's what I need you to do. Write your name and address down on this piece of paper, and I'm going to send you a complimentary family meal. I'm like, okay, that's really cool. I'm like, here's the card. And she's like, thank you. And she just looks so down. I'm like, you okay? And she said, yeah, it's all right now. And I'm like, okay, is it just all right now here or everywhere? And she said, actually, kind of everywhere. And I'm like, well, tell me a little bit about it. And I said, hey, I'm not trying to be a creep. I'm actually a pastor, so I'm just interested in people. So anything I can pray for? And she said, yeah, it's my first year at UK. I'm a manager here, and I am struggling. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. I said, I'll tell you what, we'll be praying for you. And I want you to know that. So you've got some people in your corner. Just know that. She was like, thank you very much. I'm like, sure thing. So I leave, and then I just get this prick in my spirit. That wasn't enough. So I looked the number back up on my phone, and I call as I'm heading home. And I'm like, hey, I just left there. And she was like, yeah, I recognize your voice. She was like, while I have you on the phone, I didn't even get to get my thing out. I'm calling. You don't have me on the phone. I have you on the phone. She was like, while I have you on the phone, I can't read your writing. Can you tell me your name and address again? I thought y'all would like that since I've written some stuff before. So I'm like, yeah, here it is, David Green, 21-8 Walsh Court and all that stuff. And I'm like, listen, I just want to know if I could have your permission to share your story with our church, Madison Hills Christian Church in Richmond, just so you know that there are people really praying for you. And there are people who are ready to connect with you if you need that, or to support you in any way that we possibly can. And she gave me full permission. So Journey, if you happen to be checking us out, I want you to know that these are the beautiful people who are praying for you, Madison Hills Christian Church. And if there's ever an opportunity for us to meet you, we would love to meet you as a church, as a body, as a group of people, giving our best shot at following Jesus. And we are praying for you. We're praying for you to sort some stuff out and to get your head straight and to move forward. And I hope that this is a small meal for you, just like the angel was providing for Elijah, because it's those small things that we're to use to help us to move forward. And that's the same for you and me. None of us are any different. It's a very small meal, very small provision that gives us enough for the journey ahead. That's why when you fast forward to the New Testament, there's a guy who's really close to Jesus, and he wrote something called James. We know it as a New Testament letter, James. And notice this language he says in the very first chapter. It's like right off the bat, he said, you know that when your faith is being tested, that's an opportunity for perseverance. And then notice this language. Let perseverance finish its work. That's one of my favorite verses throughout from the entire Bible. Let perseverance finish its work. Some of your Bibles would say perseverance must finish its work. And when you read that, you get the impression that perseverance is a big deal to God, because there's some things that nothing else can do, only perseverance can do. And there's no substitute for moving forward. That's it. That's the only option. Perseverance has work to do. So when you move forward and you're given just small meals to help you on this journey, well, that's the goal. It's not to be taken away, and it's not to be provision overkill. It's just a small meal to get you moving forward, because there's work to be done in your life that nothing else can do except the hardship that you're facing. And let perseverance finish its work so that you can be mature and complete. You're growing, you're developing, you're learning what it means to really follow this guy, Jesus. So that's awesome. So the story goes on, and as it goes on, I want to read to you just a little bit. If you're following along, it's 1 Kings chapter 19, but I want you to hear this. So since I have a handheld mic, let me pull this over here. All right. I want you to hear some of this language and use this as an opportunity to just allow the Word of God to just come over you and kind of saturate you and speak to you. But listen to this language. So this isn't enough for Elijah. The high with the altar thing, and then being fed by an angel, it's not enough for Elijah, okay? So he gets up, he goes on his journey, and then he moves into this place where God is known to reside at this period of time. And then the text tells us this. This is amazing. The text says, the Lord intercepted Elijah, and he said to Elijah, Elijah, what are you doing here? Isn't that a great question? What are you doing here? And he asks Elijah that question twice. And when we read this story, it's kind of like the wilderness. It's not about a place. It's about a space. So when God says, Elijah, what are you doing here? It's not really here in this location that you could put in your GPS. It's in this moment. Elijah, what are you doing here? Why are you here? Do you understand? Are you confused? Do you have questions? What does this moment represent for you, Elijah? And Elijah actually answers. He answers and he says, well, I've been very zealous for the Lord. I've been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. Do you hear what game Elijah is starting to play? God, I've been so good. God, I've been zealous. God, I've been doing everything you've asked me to do. So why am I struggling? Is that really the setup that we have? Is that the agreement? I thought if I followed you, my problems would not follow me. You ever played that game with God? I've been so zealous for you. Why is this happening? And then the story goes on. Listen to these words. So the Israelites, they've rejected your covenant. They've broken down your altars. They've put your prophets to death with the sword. And I'm the only one left. What a pity party. I'm the only one left. And I bet some of you feel like that sometimes. You watch the news. Listen to what's going on in our world. And you're giving your best shot at life. And sometimes it can feel like, am I the only one doing this? Well, God comes along and he tells Elijah, no, there's 7,000 people, Elijah, that haven't fallen into this trap that you're identifying. 7,000. Why aren't you focused on that? There's other people doing what you're doing. You're not alone. You're with people that I'm working in their hearts and minds. So again, if you feel alone, you're not. You're surrounded by people who are giving their best shot at following this guy, Jesus. So we're glad you're here with that. So the story goes on, verse 11. So the Lord said, go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass. And please get this point. This is so interesting. So then the Lord is about to pass. A great and powerful windstorm tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, there was an earthquake, and it just shook the earth. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. And when Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face. And he went out and he stood at the mouth of the cave. Our boy Elijah falls trapped to what so many of us fall trapped to. Always thinking God's in the spectacular, like burning up the altar. When he's not always in the windstorm or the earthquake or the fire, he's in the whisper. Here, in a moment, like some of you are experiencing right now. And it's not that they're experiencing God through this spectacular, but he's experiencing God through this small whisper, just like you are. There's a lot of stuff going on in your life, but you hear something, and you know it's the right sound, and you know it's what should be, and that's what you're hearing right now. That's God. Don't miss that. So the story goes on, and a second time the voice says, Elijah, what are you doing here. And then Elijah says, God, I've been so zealous for you. Why is this happening? What is going on? And then before we get to the end of the story, how hard is change for you? Are you anything like me? Is it difficult? I was doing a little research on change, and apparently these are what people fear the most. When it comes to like being afraid, people are so scared of being embarrassed. And I get that. I have two teenage daughters in the house, right? Roughly that age. So I get the embarrassment, feeling of, the threat of being embarrassed. Also the threat of something bad happening again. That is a huge fear. Fear of the unknown. And then guess what was one of the most consistent fears? Change. Change. The fear of changing. And that's why we say no one changes unless they perceive the need to change, or the threat of staying the same is so much greater than the threat of changing. Here's why that's important. When you read this story and you see how God was in nothing but that gentle whisper, meeting Elijah in that very moment here, meeting you in that very moment here, here's the point of that. And Elijah saying, I was zealous, I was this. God is about to tell Elijah, Elijah, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go back the way you came. Your first step forward is to go back the way you came. Why is that important for us? Because some of you are going to leave this building and you're going to go back the way you came, and that's great because there's food and there's football. It's going to be a great afternoon. And some of us are going to leave this building and it's not going to be so great. Because not only are we going to go back the way we came, we're going to go back the way we came, just the way we are. Elijah is to be the change. He entered that moment of here in fear. Now he was given what he needed to get into the presence of God. He heard the gentle whisper, and now he is to be the change so that when he goes back the way he came, he goes back in the right way.